how do you feel like being a multi-sport or being someone who, one of the things I love, right? I love, just hearing about coaches, athletic backgrounds, athletes, athletic backgrounds, and how they got into rowing and how that actually helped with their rowing career and whatever
Yeah.
path they did pursue, whether it was coaching or, national team, whatever it may be. Um, for you, how do you feel like being someone who was focused on soccer throughout high school, but had the rowing exposure, right? It was constantly active in your life, then going to Trinity and being a dual sport athlete, and then taking those skills then to a national team career, right? Kind of a long time, performing at the highest level. How do you feel like those skills, being a dual sport athlete, kind of, or just, soccer in general, and then obviously coupling that with rowing, how do you feel like that helped in that next phase of your journey, right? Because it was a long time before you kind of went fully into all in on coaching. There was, your athletic career and all these different things. Like, how do you feel like that unique journey balancing two sports helped guide that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's something I'm really passionate about. And we actually had, Dartmouth was very fortunate to have Roger Federer up here a couple of years ago giving the commencement speech. And I think if you ever read there's a lot of great literature out there about his upbringing and his journey into tennis. And I'm in no way trying to say I'm Roger Federer, but I do think there's a lot to be said about not specializing early on. And he was someone, he played everything growing up, and really, I think his quote is like he wasn't specialized in tennis until he was like 20 years old or something like that. And then ended up being one of the absolute just like masterful technicians of tennis, and so I actually think just having I think the book I'm referencing is Range.
I just finished reading it for the second time
Yeah.
2 weeks ago. I read it 5 years ago. I just reread it. Actually, it's funny you say that. I knew exactly where you were going when you brought up Roger Federer. But yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, and just I'm gonna butcher it, but I think kind of comparing like the Tiger Woods story and the Roger Federer story, and obviously both, pinnacle of the sport. But Roger, just went about it a totally different way and had a much more balanced view on his pursuit. And I do think that what I recognize in him that I certainly feel myself is that I felt like I had this like massive emotional capital to expend by not having used it so early on in my career. And I think that it was so fun for me to like during soccer season. I mean, I actually played in high school, I actually played 5 sports. I played soccer, then I kicked for the football team on Fridays. And then I, played basketball, and then I played baseball, and then I actually ran some track as well. So it was fun for me to do all this stuff. And it was, I didn't see it as taking away from one another. It was just kind of like, it was, okay, my mission from August to late October, hopefully, is to just like be a elite level soccer player, and then boom, like right into basketball, and then like I'm a leader on that team, and I need to just be, for me at the time, it was like I want to be like the best point guard, the best shooting guard I can be for this period of time, and then boom, like transitioning. And I don't know, the seasons kind of like naturally give you a little bit of like compartmentalization of just like, okay, winter's done, now it's on the spring. And I just think that made it, I just kept it fresh and made it so that I was not ever feeling like I was banging my head against a wall, and I think that rowing is a simple sport, and it requires an insane amount of physiological preparation and development and technical development. However, do you need to be rowing an erg every day to get that? Do you need to be rowing a boat every day to get that? There's certainly some of that cannot be compromised, but I do think as a kid, you need to have fun. It needs to be sustainable. You need to enjoy it. And then, if you end up pursuing something like the national team, it's like, if you can start that journey with excitement and with that like emotional capital still intact, then you're going to have longevity, you know? And I think that that was something that I was lucky to have, because I don't feel like I've certainly heard coaches say like, hey, just have a certain amount of hard strokes in your body. And like, you're going to either use them in high school or college or on the elite level. And I think there's maybe some truth to that type of like, maybe just from like a psychological standpoint. Um, and I just felt like I kind of, approached my elite career of just like, okay, this is great. I don't need to be, making the national team in year one. I need to just this needs to be enjoyable. This needs to be sustainable. And I need to keep getting better, year after year. But so I don't know. I think like I was, again, very much recognize how fortunate I was to kind of have a lot of people in my corner supporting me to allow me to do that and like pursue the thing I loved like at a high level for a long time. But I think there's a lot to be said about, kind of early on, whether you're, picking up rowing as a freshman in high school and trying to get recruited to college, which obviously like we spend a lot of time in that space in my current position. Yeah, you just see a lot of people who are trying to use this to get into a place, and that's kind of like the end point. And then that isn't necessarily sustainable and doesn't necessarily always lead to the best outcomes, kind of like long term. Um, so yeah, I think I was, yeah, I would, even for people that want to row in college, I'd still be a huge proponent and advocate for, um, for being a multi-sport athlete. And I don't think, I think, I think anything you do, if you're giving it, kind of your full effort, um, I think that as a high school athlete, I don't think you're going to compromise. I don't think you're going to compromise your rowing development. So, and I think that's a little bit. There's kind of some differing messages out there, I would say, on that, and I think your heart's going to develop, playing a basketball game as hard as you can. Your lungs are going to develop running cross country, and your brain is going to be excited to do something different, without just, only taking strokes. And I think that something I say to our team a lot from a technical perspective is just that, like, what you need to be really careful of is having rowing become this like monotone thing that you fall into, and like saying the same word over and over again, just like losing its meaning. And it's not a difficult and complex movement, but one of the hardest things is for us to just keep it fresh and keep it simple. And I was as guilty as that of that as anyone in the sport, and I think something I try to remind myself of and remind our team of. So